the slide deck as well as the slides. Thank you. And let me turn it over to my colleague, Kelly Raff with, I see that, who's pointing at that? Chrissy, you English language arts person. I added that title, so it's totally my fault for the IDA consultation.
That's not my slide.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. And I just said a comment, if you guys haven't renamed yourself, just because I have to record who all is here. And I don't necessarily know all of your last names if you don't have it, or your school. So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. So we're here to talk about IDEA services. I recognize a lot of you, so this will not be new information for you, but as you know, with Child Find, the district has an obligation to locate and evaluate all students who live in our BSD attendance area or attend a private school here. So each year we update it to figure out who is responsible in terms of our BSD schools for the private schools in that area. And so for students who are parentally placed in a private school, it's the responsibility of the district where the private school is located to evaluate and offer an individual service plan for students who qualify. And so just to clarify too, an individual services plan or ISP is not the same as an IEP, an individual education plan. And a services plan only provides the amount of services that is determined to be made available to parentally placed private school students. That is a lot of P's in one sentence. The service is not based on all of the services a student may need. If students are needing more or parents are wanting to access more, they're going to need to enroll to receive an IEP, and that way they'd be eligible for all their services. And so the funding for private school services is based off of IDEA funds, not state funds. Obviously, we receive a much smaller amount of IDEA funds. And so it looks like we have around $880 per student who are parentally placed in a private school for next year. So typically we talk about the available services. So if we offered transportation as part of the services, we would exhaust all of the options, that we would exhaust all the funds available for those students. So for next year, our options are going to be for speech language, we can offer a 30-minute session per month. October through May, and then they wouldn't receive academic support. Or the option is, which we've gone with for the last number of years, reading, writing, and math for 1 hour a week. So this year, with looking at SLP services, I know that's been a request in the past, and the service location would be to be determined. And so the district would determine how we're going to provide the services. It may be virtual, and it may be at a different school, not the school that's closest by, because it's going to be, it would be based on availability of SLP and their caseload. And then academic services typically would be provided closer to the private school, just depending on, again, on caseload. So if we don't select transportation, which I would recommend, then it's the parent's responsibility to transport. And the special education specialist staff member would work with the family to determine when the services would be provided during the school day. So as I said, in years past, academic services have been selected as we're able to offer more. And so this is kind of the time to weigh in on whether your private school would be interested potentially more in academic or SLP services, and that's how we'll determine it. So if people who are eligible, who are here and eligible as part of this conversation want to weigh in, that would be great. You're welcome to unmute or put it in the chat. Or I can do a poll. Yeah, Sandra, one for school. I know there's a few of you guys that are from the same school. So yeah, just one vote per school. Okay. So I'm just gonna write this down. St. Pius looking for speech, St. Cecilia speech. Okay. Let's see, I think Holy Trinity and Valley Catholic would be other ones to weigh in, as well as St. Matthew's. I think there's people here from there. Okay.
I'm from Valley Catholic High School, so we won't need that, but I don't want to speak for the elementary or the middle school. And I don't know if they're on the call or not.
I'm on the call from the middle school and we won't use any additional services. I don't believe our elementary does, but she's not able to be here today.
Okay. Thank you for jumping in and alleviating the silence. I do appreciate it. Okay, yeah, I knew we are missing a number of people. So Ashley did have a question wondering how you were eligible for speech. It'd be the way we look at any eligibility. We would have an evaluation planning meeting and the team would determine what suspected disabilities exist. And if there was one that might be a speech language impairment, they would do an evaluation. So right now it's looking like that's the predominant area. And so, like I said, it'd be 30 minutes a month, potentially virtual. So just so you guys are aware, if that's happening during the school day, that the parents would either need to get them to do a session virtually on or off campus, or you guys would need to set up a space for kids. So just so that's clear what the virtual piece means, it would still be during the school day. Any questions about that? Okay, and just also be aware too, your students who are currently receiving services for academics will no longer receive services then if we make the shift. So we'll have to be communicating with those families about the discontinuation of services in that area. So as we always do, if we are monitoring our funds and if there are insufficient funds to provide services, we will reduce services, but we would hold an IEP meeting at that point. Then next slide, if there's a concern, as a private school, you're welcome to contact me and we can talk about resolving the concern. And please keep an eye out in September because my assistant Sarah DeMaestri will be reaching out, and that's when she requests an enrollment count, and that's what we report to the state. So please keep an eye on that. It's really important so that we can make sure we're getting accurate information to report, and then in terms determine our count.
Can I ask a question about that count?
Sure.
Is there a reason why you don't count or ask for the numbers of students who may have a learning disability or someone who might fall under the umbrella of needing to be identified?
So, well, that information, we have the eligible students on our end because we have any students, but we would only report the ones that we currently have information on. So we have that. In terms of if you're suspecting one, that isn't something that we report to the state. It's not suspected disabilities. Does that make sense?
Well, if we have someone who already has been diagnosed with a disability, I'm just saying that that count doesn't ask for that information. You just ask for our total enrollment.
Correct. So we have that. If they've gone through our process, then we have that number of, we have the kids who are eligible because they're in our system that we've evaluated and found them eligible. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I am going to link the affirmation form that you guys complete each year into the chat. And then I think, John, do you guys send anything out afterward with like any of the materials?
Yes, Erin will send the forms, the slide deck and the slides, so we can
Perfect.
definitely include that.
Awesome. So yeah, that's the affirmation form. So if you could sign and return that, that would be fabulous. And I think the last slide is just our contact information if you have any other questions, but I am happy to answer any questions that we have right now. All right.
I have a quick question. Sorry, if we have specific questions about special education in the public school, would you be a contact person that we could reach out to?
Yeah.
To ask this question? Would that be okay to reach out in private? Obviously, it's not a whole group conversation, but just.
Yes, please feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I'm happy to talk about whatever situation you have.
Perfect. Karen brought up an interesting point there, and I was curious, like if kids have a diagnosis through a private testing that would make them eligible, should they be included in the count, or is that it's only kids that you have yourselves discovered? Is that what the count is reported to the state?
Yeah, we're looking at the students who've actually been found eligible, just because there's a lot of, unless they've gone through the process and have been found eligible, that's the only thing that we're looking at, not just suspected disabilities or private diagnoses.
Yeah, so don't look at private diagnosis. Perfect. Okay, I was just curious. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, well, feel free to reach out to me if you have any other information. And yes, if you could return the affirmation form, I would be very appreciative. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it. And she's kind of set the bar. That was like 15 slides in 7 minutes or something like that. So, okay, here we go. Notice that consultation is spelled correctly on that slide and on this slide. So consultation around equitable services, it's really, to make equitable services work, consultation is key. And it's to ensure that we're providing equitable services that are specified in the law and meet the needs of your students and staff. So I think about, this is just the initial consultation meeting. There are some things that we need to talk through and make some decisions on or get your input on today. And then we really do ongoing consultation with you as you develop your plan and as we deliver the services that are specified in that plan. So consultation is really an ongoing process. So a couple of topics we need some input on that we, when you sign the affirmation of consultation form, there's going to be a list that says we have consulted on these topics. And so I want to make sure we cover those in the meeting today. I don't think we've done necessarily the greatest job at this, and some of it's going to seem a little arcane probably, but we do need to follow the requirements that are laid out in federal law. So the first one is consultation on transferring funds. So districts may transfer funds to any other title. So Title I, Title I-C, Migrant, Title III for English language learners. We can transfer funds from Title II, which is professional development, Title IV-A, which is the kind of catch-all bucket that has a lot of flexibility if you've been participating and are familiar with that. And if the district transfers funds out of Title II or Title IV, that would impact the allocations for equitable services to private schools, because it's based on the total amount of funding and then the number of students enrolled in public and private schools. So before we make any decision on that, we need to get your input. The district proposes that we would not transfer funds from Title II and Title IV. We never have transferred funds from Title II and Title IV. So I just want to make sure that you are cool with that. And if not, I'd like to hear any concerns that you have around this proposal.
Where are you proposing to transfer them to? I'm sorry if I missed that.
If we were transferring, we could transfer between Title II and Title IV, or we could transfer into Title I-A, Title I-C, and Title III. But we're proposing not to transfer funds.
What would be the benefit of transferring the funds?
Well, if you're participating in Title I, what would be the benefit to a private school?
Well, you're seeking input and I'm trying to better understand the implications or what changes would possibly be made.
Great. So if we transferred funds from Title II to say Title I-A, all of the schools participating in Title II would receive a less amount of Title II dollars because it's based on number of students enrolled. Schools that are participating in Title I, including our district schools, would receive more funds per eligible pupil for Title I purposes. Sarah, thanks for the comment. Any other input or questions, concerns about our proposal not to transfer funds? Right, then we will not. So let's talk a little bit about how funding for equitable services is determined. So the district has an indirect cost rate for grant programs, and that's calculated by submitting information to ODE. They determine what percentage of the district's operating costs support indirect services. So like our business office, HR functions, keeping the lights on in our facilities where central services are located. That rate is 3.74%. And according to federal law, districts can also reserve funds that are reasonable and necessary for administering equitable services. So administration costs would be Aaron's salary or Jessica's salary or Chrissy's salary, things like that. And that's on top of the indirect funds. Our proposal is to not reserve any additional funds for administrative costs. So we will claim the indirect funds. Those come off the top of the pot for all of our grant programs, and then nothing else beyond that. Any concerns about that proposal? I didn't think so. I mean, it would be different if we said we want to take an additional 2% for Title III or an additional, to cover blah, blah, blah costs. Then we'd probably have more of a discussion around this. Okay, so we've consulted on that. So I think I've alluded to this already. Title II and Title IV, after indirect costs are deducted, the allocation for equitable services for private schools is based on just the total enrollment of public and private school students. So that's why we asked for your enrollment prior to mid-June. When we get our final allocation over the summer, we add up all the public school students in the district and all the private school enrollments for schools that are participating in Title II and in Title IV, divide it out, and that's the per pupil allocation for equitable services. Title I, and so here's an example. You don't have to look at it now. This was from last year. The per pupil allocation was $21 per pupil. For Title I, it's a little bit different. Thanks, Chrissy. So it's based on the number of low-income public and private school students within the Title I school boundaries. So we take all, so the district chooses which schools to designate as receiving Title I funds. And currently that's 15 elementary schools and 1 secondary school. Next year, it'll just be the 15 elementary schools. So we total all of the students that we know of that are eligible for free or reduced price lunch from those schools, and all of the students that live within the boundaries of those schools in those grades. So in other words, they would attend those schools if they weren't enrolled with you. And if they're eligible for free and reduced lunch, we add them into the pot and then determine the percentage of private school students that are eligible that generate funds for Title I. I'm kind of butchering this, but Chrissy will explain it better later, I'm sure. And that's the set aside. So last year, 0.65% of students that were in the boundaries of our Title I schools were attending a private school. And so that 0.65% of our total allocation was $38,000. And after deducting the indirect costs, that was an allocation of $1,265 per eligible student in a private school. And we can go over that again later. For Title III, we also take indirect costs off the top, and then similar to Title I, but a little bit less complicated, the per pupil amount is based on the number of English learners in both public and private schools. So we also ask for that information on your, I forgot the name of it, the intent to participate in your enrollment numbers. We ask for that number so we can do that allocation. So thinking ahead, these are our equitable service estimates for 2023-24, we received a huge increase in Title I funds, which are based largely on the percentage of students that live within the district that are in poverty. And so this is census data. And so we think, and with that, and with a big increase in the federal funding for Title I that was just passed, we would estimate that it would be $1,600 per student in your school that generates funds for Title I. Title II and Title IV, Title II was pretty flat. Title IV, we actually are receiving a smaller allocation. So when you think about planning, when you're completing your equitable services plan, think about $20 per enrolled student for Title II and $10 per student for Title IV. And for Title III, I would use $135 per student. We have no, and Toshiko, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have any updated estimate on what our allocation will be next year. So this was last year's per student allocation for equitable services.
No, you're right. Yeah, we don't have an updated one.
Okay, great. This is a new topic for consultation. According to federal law, private school services can be provided through pooling the total allocation, or they can be distributed on a school-by-school basis. So what we've done in the past is on a school-by-school basis. So based on your enrollment, we create a little pot for you, a little cost center, and then we budget out of that based on what you ask for in terms of equitable services. The other option is that we could take all the private schools funds and put it in one big pot and then provide equitable services to you based on the availability of funds in that pot. And I don't actually know how this would work, if it's first come, first served, or what the deal is. I imagine there might be cases where pooling funds make sense if there were, I don't, say Valley Catholic was the only private school in our district and they have an elementary, middle, and a high, they might say, hey, why don't you just put our funds in one pot and then we'll figure out how to disperse them, how to request equitable services for those three schools. I'm not trying to bias your decision, but seems to me it would just, I imagine Aaron is probably having a heart attack right now if you said, well, maybe not. Maybe it would be easier to just put in a big pot. But we would propose just keeping the status quo. It seems to be working, and determining equitable services on a school-by-school basis. And of course, we would encourage and facilitate if you have like needs for equitable services, like you wanted to do joint professional development activities across schools, we can make that happen even though the allocations are in separate pots. We could very easily, I say, hopefully, Aaron, support those types of activities even with keeping the funds on a school-by-school basis. Okay, go school by school, school by school. Anybody really want to explore pooling funds? Thank you, thank you. Okay, good. On track. All right. I have a lot to say, goodness. Carryover. I apologize. Carryover. Carryover is very interesting, and the rules seem to have evolved, particularly with the pandemic funding and how those funds were available for carryover or not. And ODE has been very helpful producing a private school equitable services for private schools handbook. And they have been very clear about how carryover is to be handled, and it's in writing, and I will share that. So first off, when you have submitted an approved plan, you have access to funds for that plan starting July 1, before the school year starts, and you can use those funds up through September 30th. So the funds are available for 15 months. We are obligated to carry over, if there are extenuating circumstances, carry over those funds for equitable services for you. And the definition of extenuating circumstances depends on the program. So next slide. Hopefully I've got this right. Yes. So for Title II, Title III, Title IV, extenuating circumstances are really pretty narrow. So it's something like you had something in your plan and you said, gone through the steps to make it happen. Say it was professional development and the presenter got sick at the last moment and couldn't carry it out. That would be an extenuating circumstance that if you couldn't get that rescheduled by September 30th, we could set aside those funds, carry them over past September 30th through the next year so that those equitable services could be provided. If there are, and the second bullet is the new interpretation, and this is probably giving Aaron a headache. I know it is me. If there are no extenuating circumstances, so September 30th comes, you've done what's in your plan and you have, I don't know, $400 left over. Those funds, what we've done in the past is just brought them back into the district and used them for district activities for carryover. So if there are private school funds that are not expended by September 30th, we scoop those back up and then we have to reallocate, just like we do the original funds based on enrollment, to all schools in the district. So instead of saying, you know, September 30th, your funds are gone, unless there are extenuating circumstances, we will be notifying you, and it probably won't be till November, once everything's all resolved, how much carryover funds you have to use in support of your current plan. So it's good news, there's more funding available. It's more of a headache on our end because now everybody's going to have, assuming there are carryover funds, there'll be two pots of funds, your current year funds and then the carryover funds. I don't expect it to be a large amount of money, but we're going to follow the rules and do that this coming year. For Title I, extenuating circumstances are things like maybe the person that we've hired to provide services to your qualifying students for Title I has to go on leave, or we weren't able to hire someone soon enough. So if Title I funds are not expended by September 30th, then those funds from whatever school they come from go back into a pot, and then they are allocated out to solely private schools. So we think we had 4 private schools participate in Title I last year. If 2 of them had funds that weren't expended, we would reallocate those based on the number of eligible students in the schools. And you could, again, use that to supplement your equitable services plan for Title I. All right. I'm going to take a breath and let me ask if there are questions. Oh, no, let me do, well, I guess just one more slide. And I've been over this, and then we'll break for questions before Aaron talks about the required forms for equitable services. But again, this is ongoing consultation. So as you develop your plan, you're all great about reaching out and saying, can we do this? Can we do that? Can you help us with this? We're happy to do that. So to consult as you develop your plan, in which you're going to identify your needs, how the equitable services are going to be provided, and then the assessment and evaluation of those services. Natalie, question.
Thank you for all this information. It's very helpful. I had a quick question about Title I when you were talking about there are 15 or so elementary schools, and there was 1 or 2 middle schools before, and now those are going away. It's just the elementary schools. I guess my question is, if you have a student who qualifies when they're in elementary school, but then moves to middle school, do they no longer qualify for funds, or is it determined based on your elementary school, or is it determined in the school that you're in at the moment?
When they move to middle school, the middle schools don't receive Title I funds.
Okay.
So they don't get those extra services.
No extra services if you're in your middle school or above.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
John, I have a quick question. What about a Low Huber Park? Since it's K-8?
Yeah, it's an elementary school. So students that are enrolled in that school's boundaries.
Yeah.
That would attend that school in grades K through 8 would generate funds for a private school if they were enrolled in a private school.
Yeah.
All right. Other questions right now? You can also chat them in if you prefer. We can cover them later. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron to walk folks through the forms before we go into specific titles.
All right. So within the next few days, I'm going to send out an email to everybody with all the necessary forms. And just right now go over a quick briefing of each form. Verification of consultation. Beaverton School District needs to turn this into ODE. It just verifies that you attended this meeting or watched the recording and discussed all the bullet points that ODE requires. And the next form is intent to participate. This is your opportunity to indicate which title program you're interested in. And also we collect your enrollment on this form, which will help determine your allocation for whatever title program you're participating in. And the income residence form is only for Title A. This helps determine if you qualify, your student qualifies for Title A based on income. So if you're not interested in Title A, disregard this form. We provide it in Spanish, and there is also a Google form available if you wish. If you want the Google form, let me know, and I will get you the link. And the Equitable Services Planning template is where you outline your plan for the year for titles, all of the title programs. New to this form is question 1. That does not apply to Title I. Chrissy will contact you regarding evaluation of your Title I program. That's for evaluation of this year, so 22 to 23 of the services you provided. And your plan for next year is outlined in 2, 3, and 4 for 23-24 school year. And if you have any complaints or concerns, our ODE representative, Jeanette Newton, she's very responsive by phone. You can email her, or you can fill out a form and register your complaint. She can help us work through any issues be present. The forms are due, most of them are due June 12th. Your plan is due September 18th, and we can't distribute funds without receiving your plan, so be sure to get that in. And this is just a handy reference of who to contact at BSD for whatever program you're participating in.
Thanks, Aaron. The couple of things. One is, I hope that if you have a complaint or an issue, that you would come to us first. Because contacting Jeanette, the ombudsman, is really in a place where we don't agree through the consultation process and think that the district is not really following the intent of the law or is not providing the services that you need. So, but do know that that's there. If there's ever an issue you think that I'm not sure this is right, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a complaint. You can also contact her and say, you know, I have a question. I want to do this with these funds. The district's saying no. What's my recourse? Jeanette is great to work with. And then the other piece, Erin mentioned that on the planning template, there's a new first question around evaluation of the program. Chrissy's done a great job working with schools participating in Title I equitable services to evaluate how the services have been helping students that are receiving Title I support. We have not, I think, for Title II and Title IV, done a very good job around that evaluation component. I think a year or two back, we asked you to evaluate on a separate form and then request carryover when there was carryover available to anyone due to the pandemic, and then we dropped that. And rather than send a separate form, hopefully it's helpful to you to, as you're filling out your plan for next year's equitable services, to reflect on what went well with this year's services and what could be improved. So that's why there's that fourth question on there, which is the first question. And again, as Erin mentioned, it's just for Title II, III, and IV. So not for Title I-A, you have a separate evaluation process for that. All right, Title II, improving teacher quality. And for folks that are new or interested, thinking about participating this year, please, Erin put up the contact information. Please feel free to email us and say, can you go over this again? Or I didn't quite get that. I'm kind of racing through these, and I'm going to try and not race through them because some of our private school partners have been participating in these programs for years, and some of you are just thinking about whether this would be something that would be helpful to your staff and students. So, breath. Title II-A is ensuring that about ensuring all students have effective teachers to help your students achieve high academic standards. And so private school participation, you can serve teachers, principals, instructional assistants. They are all welcome to participate to the extent that we use funds for professional development for teachers and other school personnel. And we use them for primarily for teachers and principals, but there are opportunities for our instructional assistants to participate. So when you're doing your plan, think of all three of those audiences. So it requires a needs assessment, which is embedded in the plan, just thinking about what professional learning and support do teachers and principals need to help students succeed. So you'll want to look at, could be academic data that suggests that teachers need additional professional development to support students in academic areas. You want to look at trends in that data, gaps in that data. It can be you'll definitely want to think about asking teachers what their professional development needs are, and look at that data, prioritize your needs, because there's never enough money for professional development, and then develop your plan. And so question 2 on the planning template is, what are the needs? Question 3 is, how can Beaverton support you in providing equitable services to meet those needs? And then the last question is, and how are you going to assess the effectiveness of those needs? So you start to see this little looping cycle. How did it go? What are the needs now? What are the equitable services to meet those needs? How are we going to assess? What did the assessment say? And you're in this infinite loop. So allowable uses of funds, and there'll be a link where you can actually get to all the activities, but you're really looking at professional development that will improve student achievement. It doesn't have to be, professional development in reading and math necessarily. It could be anything that's going to help students in their academic journey. It could be professional development around social emotional learning. It could be professional development in science. It could be professional development on how to use data to inform instruction, all kinds of things. Anything that will improve the knowledge and skills of your staff and translate into the classroom. Other things that you could do, I forgot, integrating technology, meeting the needs of students with disabilities or English language learners or your talented and gifted students, student behavior management. It's really wide open, and I really appreciated the thoughtfulness that you've put into developing a plan to meet the needs of your staff. So sometimes you're accessing equitable services for tuition for a teacher to attend a class. Other times it's bringing in a presenter to work with your whole staff, book studies, all kinds of things. We've been glad to provide to you and your staff to help them grow as teachers. So this is and I think of it as an admonishment from the federal government, is that, short-term one-off workshops and conferences are not approvable on their own. So when you're constructing your plan, if you want to send folks to a conference, and a lot of you do, that needs to be part of a larger strategy. So be thinking about, how does the knowledge that participants at the conference gain get implemented or get shared with other staff that aren't able to attend? So how is that embedded in the work of the teacher in the classroom? And same thing with if you bring in a speaker for a one-day professional development, how is that followed up so that the learning that happens on that day actually gets implemented? Sorry, Chrissy, I threw you on that last slide. Things that we can't do with Title II funds is to pay a portion of a teacher's salary or benefits. Now, you certainly can ask us to use Title IIA funds for stipends. So if you have a teacher that you want to mentor, a beginning teacher in your school, we are happy to employ them as casual labor and pay them a stipend for mentoring that teacher outside of their regular classroom day. Unfortunately, we can't pay for substitutes when you have teachers attend professional development activities. That's a private school obligation. And across all title funds, we can't reimburse. So we have to be the fiscal agent. We're responsible for providing the equitable services. And so that means that if you want to go to a conference, if you want to have a speaker in, we do the contracting, we do the arranging, the flight arrangements, the conference registrations, the book purchases, all of that. We're the fiscal agent. We can't reimburse you for funds. Our responsibilities is to help you address the needs that you've identified in your plan, and to the extent possible, since it's on an equal per pupil basis, provide the same training and instruction to your teachers that have similar needs that we would to our teachers with similar needs. We need to spend the same amount per pupil. We've talked about how the allocations work, and I'm not very good at this, and I don't know how to get better, but we need to be better at informing you of professional development activities that are funded through Title IIA that your teachers would have the opportunity to participate in. So a lot of the activities we fund through Title IIA are pretty specific to our curriculum. So I don't think that an invitation would necessarily be appropriate, but maybe I shouldn't be that gatekeeper. But I do try and invite, I try and keep in my head what's in your plan and invite you to Title II funded activities that might be relevant for you. So I guess, Aaron, something to think about for next year is how can we make this better? And maybe we just continually just put out any of our Title IIA opportunities and say, if your teachers want to find this relevant and want to participate, they're welcome to participate. It's our obligation to invite you to come alongside us for those activities to the extent possible. And at the same time, know that you have your own pot of funds for your specific professional development needs. And of course, we're responsible for consulting on all of that. Your responsibilities is to do a needs assessment that we've talked about, plan and request those services with as much lead time as possible so we can make the arrangements and evaluate those services. And get your forms in. Okay, let me stop there and pause and see if there are any questions about Title II professional development funds. And if you don't want to ask now, if you want, feel free to reach out as you're developing your plan. You know, can we do this? Can you help us with this? Happy to consult then. But any questions about Title II? All right, Title IVA, student support and academic enrichment. So per pupil allocation, you need to do a needs assessment, you know, same cycle. What are the needs? What are the services the district can provide you to support your students? And then how are you going to assess it? Or how are we going to assess it? And then what do we learn from that and repeat the cycle? Title IVA, there are three broad categories: well-rounded education, safe and healthy students, and effective use of technology. And that would include professional development as well. So if you are a small school and don't have a lot of Title IIA and Title IVA funds, you can use Title IV to support professional development for your staff in those areas. Well-rounded education is very broad. Safe and healthy students is a little more narrow. And then effective use of technology is what it says. So there in that link, there'll be a list of allowable activities. And our friends at ODE have been very accommodating to make those pots, those broad categories, as broad as possible so that those funds are of benefit to you and to districts. Oh, that's all I had to say. Obligations, same as Title II. Title IV-B, 21st Century Learning Communities. We are just ending the 5th year of a grant to provide after school and summer school programming for students that result in positive youth development and academic enrichment and academic support, as well as engaging families. We are partnering with Metropolitan Family Services again, and we'll submit an application at the end of May to continue and enhance our program. And if funded, which we would know at the end of June, if you have students in the Greenway, McKay, or Raleigh Hills elementary boundaries that have need for this type of program, we are obligated to make slots available for your students. I know it can be difficult because of just different start and stop times and transportation and all those things, but do know that if you're interested in participating, we will reach out if we are funded and let you know, provide information about programming if you have students in one of those 3 elementary school catchment areas. And then our last title before I turn it over to Chrissy for Title 1A, I think that's the right order, is a new grant program that's called Project Serve, Title 4F. That's an unfortunate acronym, but it's funding available from the federal government directly to a district if a district experiences a violent or a traumatic crisis. So it could be a natural disaster, it could be a school shooting that results just a school shooting, anything like that. It's very quick for the district to apply for funds when such an event occurs that would help restore the learning environment after such a disruption. And if we did, we would provide equitable services to your school if you were participating in Title IV and wish to access those services and were your students and staff were affected by that traumatic event. So there was an earthquake and we applied for those funds and your buildings were affected as well, since you're within the boundaries, we would be applying for funds on your behalf and providing services in the same way that we would support our schools in that time of need. All right. Any questions about Title IV before I turn it over to Chrissy and Title 1A? And so Title IV could be 4A, 4B, 4F. All right. So as a reminder, if you are not participating in Title I or Title III, you're welcome to jump off now if you need to. I know we're getting close to 4 o'clock, so we still have another half hour to go. You're also welcome to, turn off your camera and come back on for final Q&A if you like. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chrissy for Title 1A.
Great. Thank you, John. Okay, we're just going to review Title 1A, just like John has been doing. The purpose of Title 1A is to provide supplemental educational services, supplemental being the key word, for eligible public and private school students, just to offer a fair, equal, and significant opportunity for all. So funds are generated, there's a per pupil allocation based on the number of private and public school students in poverty who reside in the Beaverton School District Title I attendance areas. So as John had said before, there are 15 Title I schools in Beaverton School District, and here they are right here. We used to have 3 K-8 schools. Now there's only one, which is Aloha Huber Park. So these are our 15 schools. When we're looking up addresses, these are the schools that we're looking to see if students are living within the boundary of these schools. So how poverty is determined. So it's the free and reduced lunch eligibility. Aaron shared the income residence form. And so private schools gather that information. So the families fill that form out. It's called an income residence form. And then they give it to us. And then we look up the addresses of those families and the number of qualifying students residing in a BSD Title I school attendance area determines the funding. So those are the students that generate the funds for the school. So the students that live in the boundary of a Title I school and have those guidelines for free and reduced lunch eligibility. So they generate the funds for the school. Then the eligible students who you can use those funds on. So they must reside in a BSD Title I attendance area, and they must be failing or at risk of failing academic standards based on multiple objective and criteria. So multiple assessments could be a standardized test, and then other assessments the teacher is giving. Poverty is not a criteria for students for service, only to generate funds. So I'm just going to explain this one more time. So funds are generated through the criteria of poverty, And then you get the chunk of money for your school, and then you can use that money on students who live in a Title I attendance area. They don't need to be students of poverty. They just need to have a need, an academic need, and live in the attendance area of Title I school. So you can use those funds on just those students. That took me a while to get that, to figure that out. Allowable use of funds. Funds may only be used for supplemental instructional services outside the regular classroom. So if you have a student who is a striving reader, so they should be getting their regular reading instruction, and then you can use those funds on supplemental instruction in addition to that regular reading instruction they get in the classroom. And that can look a number of different ways. It can be provided by a BSD employee or third-party contractor. Some of you have people that have been working with these kids for years, and they fill out the contracts and they're familiar with it. Or you can get you can come to us and say, do you have anyone in mind? And we'll look for people. Allowable use of funds can be used for extended day. Oh, Karen had a question. What is your process for determining poverty for your public school students? Is it a survey such as we are asked to use? We were just talking about this at our last meeting, John, weren't we?
Yeah, Karen, I'm happy to go through that. Can we go through the rest of Chrissy's presentation? Because there's something else I need to add in about that.
Yeah. We were just talking about that. So allowable use of funds, you can always also use it for like extended day programs, like keeping some kids after school. That's when you do the supplemental instruction. You can use it for family engagement activities, counseling programs, and computer assisted instruction. Here's some additional information regarding the funds. We want to try to get the services for the private school students to start the same time it happens to the public school, which is in the fall after assessments. I know it takes some time to get some assessments and determine which students need these services. And I know we're trying to get back to a baseline. Things were during the pandemic, things were just kind of up and down, and services were started late, and we're going to try to scooch back and get services started as soon as possible. They may be delivered directly through the district or indirectly through contracts with public and private organizations or individuals. Again, John mentioned this district controls the funds, materials, and equipment. So you let us know, we pay for that. And if you have materials that were purchased with title funds that you no longer need, you can let us know, and then we can pick those up from your school. Delivery of services must be neutral, secular, and non-ideological. And services for private school students must be for the same grade span. We talked about this as the services provided for public school students. So Title I services are for elementary school students. But if you have, like, let's say a 6th grade student who has an academic need and they live in the boundary of a Lower Huber Park, they can use those funds as well, because Lower Huber Park is a K-8. Unallowable use of funds, providing only instructional materials or supplies. The resource needs to be supported by a teacher. So for instance, if you buy a technology program online, it still needs to be supported by a teacher. Professional development for all private school staff. You can only use funds for professional development for teachers who are working with the Title I students, and that professional development is usually around the resources that you purchase with those Title I funds. We can't use funds on substitutes. We cannot use funds for screening assessments. Preschoolers are not eligible for equitable services. And a private school may never be reimbursed for materials and supplies purchased for title programs. John talked a little bit about that. District responsibilities, timely and ongoing consultation. Just know you can always email me and reach out to me. I'm happy to come out and meet with you or Zoom with you. And if I don't have the answer to your question, I will do my best to get those answers, but I am available for support. District responsibility also to gather the poverty and residency information. Once you send those forms to us, Erin and I immediately start looking up addresses and we try to get that information back to you. And you might get a couple emails from me. Provide BSD Title I teacher or hire third-party contractor. So if you say, hey, I'm looking for someone to do this, I will go look through my district and try to find a person or resource for you. And sometimes you have people as well, and then you'll bring them to us. Work with private school to annually evaluate the program. I did this last year. I set up a date and met with everyone individually. I sent you the form ahead of time and we went through the evaluation, and we'll be doing that again. So just look for an email from me. I'll be sending out soon. And again, the district responsibility is to administer and retain control of funds. The private school responsibility, timely return of required forms and documentation of needs assessment, which is really included in your plan. The plan and request for services. Ongoing communication with BSD regarding program implementation. We used to require like an update every month, but I talked to ODE, they said that is not required. Work with BSD to annually evaluate the program, which we do. The private school must notify families of their students' participation in the Title I program. So this may just look like a letter home about your child is receiving supplemental instruction in reading. This is when they'll be meeting. This is what they're doing. So just a little notification letter for the families. And the services must hold reasonable promise that the academic performance of private school students will improve with this supplemental instruction. End of the year evaluation. I just said that I'll be reaching out to get a date on the calendar. And that is it for Title I-A. Does anybody have any questions?
I did want to talk about how those allocations are determined. So that was my question in the chat. So if we could continue that during this consultation, maybe at the end of the meeting when you're ready.
Yeah, I could, Karen, I could take that now. Try. So one thing I wanted to mention is that the income form that we ask you to send home to parents, that's one way that you can identify students for eligibility. I think it's the primary way. The law says there are other options. So for example, if you give scholarships to students and you use the same income level to provide that scholarship, your parent doesn't need to fill out that form. You can just tell us, this is the kid that's on scholarship, and ask if that kid lives in our boundaries, as long as the criteria is the same as for free and reduced lunch. And then there are some private schools that provide free meals to kids, again, based on that income form. So if you already collected that information from parents because you serve free meals to students, you don't need to make them fill our form out again. You can just send us what you have. But the criteria of the income guidelines, they have to meet the income guidelines in order to be eligible. So as far as our allocations, so back in the old days, it was all based on, we would have parents fill out the same form that your parents fill out. So it was the free and reduced lunch form. Things have changed at the federal level. And in fact, I think it's 12 of our 15 or 13 of our 15 schools, we have enough students that are living in poverty that all kids in the schools eat for free, regardless of their income, and they don't fill out that form. So we only have a couple of title schools that fill out that form. Non-title schools, everybody fills out the form. But to determine the number of eligible students, since we don't have access to the forms because parents don't need to fill them out in most of our Title I schools, what the method that we use for all of our schools is to take the number of students that are directly certified as eligible for free and reduced for free lunch, free or reduced price lunch. Well, it's basically free lunch. And it's a process called direct certification. So these are kids that are eligible for, their families are eligible for benefits either through SNAP, so Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or TANF, Temporary Assistance to Needy Families. Or they are in a program that because the student participates in that program, they're automatically eligible for free and reduced lunch. So all migrant students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. All students that are experiencing houselessness are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Homeless, migrant. Oh, any foster children are automatically eligible for free and reduced lunch. So we get that information from ODE. It's a much lower number than the percentage of students that are eligible through the income form. And so the federal government says to figure out an approximation of the percentage of kids eligible for free and reduced lunch, take that percentage of kids that are eligible through direct certification and multiply that by 1.6. And that would give the approximate number of students that would be eligible based on the income guideline requirements. Yeah, and so that percentage is the number of kids that we serve in our title schools, and then we add in the number of your students that are within those boundaries that meet the free and reduced lunch requirement to determine the per pupil allocation. Karen, that was a lot of information. We can go over it again offline, or is there anything I said that still kind of
Well, since we are required to use the income survey, and we may or may not get 100% participation or return on those surveys, are we missing any students who would have been generating funds? Or are we able to maybe apply the proportionality agreement for whatever percentage of Beaverton School District students are receiving Title I allocations? Could we apply that same percentage to our private school students so that we're not missing anybody who opted not to return the survey? Similarly to how IDEA applies proportionality to allocate our funds.
I am going to have to investigate that and give that back to you. Actually, could you send, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email, because that is the fourth option. So it's kids you're serving free lunch to, the kind of scholarship list, the income eligibility form, and proportionality is another option. I don't know how it works. I'm assuming it's something like we would check the address of every kid in your school that live to see if they're within a Title I school boundary. And whatever number of kids that was, we'd apply the proportionality percent based by each school. Okay, anyway, we can have a offline conversation about that maybe next week. Thanks
Excellent.
for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chrissy about Title I? All right. Thanks, Chrissy. Andy, Migrant Ed Program, Title I-C.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andy Robinson. I am the coordinator of the Title I-C Migrant Education Program. So I'm going to go over the broad strokes of the purpose of the program and then some information that is particularly pertinent to you all, I believe. So the program has 4 goals: school readiness, which comes in the form of pre-K instruction and support, math, reading, and graduation. Next slide, please. And so each of those goals is supported in a number of ways. Qualifying criteria for students are these: 3 to 21 years old, not yet graduated or attained a GED. And then there's a pretty complex formula for having a qualifying move and qualifying work. And our staff they're probably the best people that your staff can work with to help identify potential candidates for the program if you believe a student may qualify. And we'll get to that. So at the bottom of this slide is a link to our Beaverton School District enrollment form. And if you explore that, you will see that there is a section that asks questions that help us investigate and identify students that may qualify for the program. Next slide, please, John. So here are some examples of qualifying employment. For example, various agricultural work, sawmills, irrigation, livestock. They can earn wages or be engaged in these practices for subsistence. So in a nutshell, if you believe that if a student family may qualify for the program, you can reach out to our team. We're all trained to interview families to determine if they qualify. Go ahead, John, next slide, please. Now, this bit.ly link is a link that you can go into and also share with your staff and directly with families and students. We have all of our information in English and Spanish, and it gives great detail as to the services we offer and also the contact people of who students, families, and you all can contact if you have questions about it. For example, we provide tutoring. The program provides certain insurance, a lot of family engagement opportunities and training for staff as well. Next slide, please, John. I just went over the summer school parent engagement, and our migrant education program team also has your students who are enrolled in your program and who are in this program on all of our contact lists. So when we have these programs, we're frequently reaching out and making calls to your students as well, inviting them to these different opportunities. For example, we have student leadership opportunities. In June, we're taking students to Washington, D.C. for a leadership conference. Next slide, please, John. Parent meetings, I talked a little bit about family engagement. Here's a little bit more detail. A required part of this title program is parent engagement. So we have a parent leadership team that guides the parent program. And then we also have a number of really training and educational opportunities for all of the migrant parents themselves, a variety of topics, all related to the program goals. So our private school budget, this is what we have allocated per student. In sum, let us know what you need, communicate directly with us, and we'll speak to you about what we can provide and how to access those services. Some of the services are provided by the Oregon Migrant Education Service Center, which is based in Salem. They're doing a lot now, especially virtually across the state, to support families. Okay, next slide, John, please. And then really, this is just an overview. Again, if you have questions, you can click on that link. It goes to all of our program services and contact people, more information there. Feel free to share that with your staff. And at the bottom of this slide too is not so much related to migrant ed. I think Toshiko and I created this to help share information about in general how our multilingual department services, how they cross over and support charter and private schools. So if you click on that, there's more information there. For example, what professional development we're providing, who does Title III testing for students, IEPs, interpretation, translation services. So you can explore that more. If you ever have a question about what it is we do to support you and what you are responsible for in those areas. Okay, John, next slide. That might be it for Title 1C. That's it. But please reach out to me if you have any questions. Any questions now? Or should we keep moving, John? I'm happy to stay and answer questions.
Yeah, any questions about Title 1C migrant for Andy? All right. So our last but not least, Title III English language learners. And I'm sorry, I apologize that we did not build in some sort of break. I hope you're tending to your needs. This has been a marathon, but Toshiko's going to close us out strong. So take it away, Dr.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bridges. I hope that I did revise some of these. Can you refresh? Are you able to refresh? If it's too much, then it's fine. Okay, thank you. We just linked up some updated information from ODE. So our Title III, as you all know, this is a program that supports students that are multilingual learners that qualify or that are adding English as an additional language. The purpose of the grant or the title funds is to provide supplemental support to students that qualify as an English learner. It is good for during the school year as well as summer. This is just some data on our EL population, our top languages, top EL languages, the number of active students we have in the district. We do monitor our WAVE students as well as our ELs that for 1 to 4 years after they've exited the program. Next slide. So this is new this year, starting January 1st, 2023, we all had to switch. Some districts were using the legacy language use survey and some were using the bridge. But starting January 1st, we all had to switch to the district or to the state's consistent language use survey. It was the number of questions were significantly reduced to about 4 or 5. There is also an answer key or survey key for determining eligibility. So if you have not made that switch, I believe everybody has to start using the new LUS. And I think this is also updated, John, and I think you added this last time. I think it is still valid that private schools may use the alpha, the summative and screening instruments of their choice, not required to participate in the state ELP testing requirements. However, an alternative assessment should be valid and reliable and should utilize objective criteria, etc. If the district and private school officials after consultation decide to administer the ALPA to emerging bilingual students, that cost can come out of the equitable share of the Title III Part A funds. I believe it's the last time we checked, it was approximately $200 per student. If a private school has participated, they are responsible for administering. However, we can provide training to your staff. So the name that was here before, John, was Rena, but I'm assuming that it'll be Christina for providing some training on ALPA summative or ALPA screener. These are just the schools we had participating in Title III this past year. I think that's all for this slide. So we get asked a lot about participating in professional development. This is an allowable collaboration with private schools, and we can invite private schools to our professional development. We have, I believe we do have some people that have been attending, but we provide a ton of PD during the summer. We do school-specific PD. We can send some people out to the schools. We could do job-embedded PD in the form of like studio classrooms, for example. If you want to observe schools in their models, we can also organize that. We have been working with West Ed in providing QTEL professional development to high schools, middle schools, and we are getting ready to add a leadership component to that. QTEL also has a newcomer component, so we will be sending people to the newcomer training as well. We offer in-house collaborative co-teaching training, and we do bring over some key researchers for dual language as we are thinking about expanding dual language programs in our district. We also send out a weekly staff newsletter. So if you have any staff members that you want us to add to that mail list, the email list, please let us know. We can add them. This is what I had from last time, John. It's 138.82 $115, I believe, per student. I think your site would have 135. It's around that amount. We haven't received our budget for next year yet. That won't come out until August. It did increase though, which is great. It could pay for, materials for testing, PD. We invite, but again, we don't pay for subs. We can't use those funds. And if you would like to see your balance of how much you have, you can email Beth Navarro and she would be able to provide that balance to you. We also have 2 carryovers that we are working on right now, and you have access to that carryover. So if you did not spend all of the funds in that fund year, then you have access to that carryover amount. So just let us know how you would like to spend those funds. And I think that's it. Any questions for Title III?
Oh, yep, I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Chico.
I
On one of the first slides that you showed about the ALPA testing, I was under the impression that the private schools could not use the ALPA.
Yeah, we kept going back and forth on that. One year they say that you couldn't, and then they said, yeah, you can. And then I haven't heard, I thought the latest was that you still have access to the ALPA summative and the screening instruments.
Okay.
Do you not have access?
No, we've been doing lost links because I was told at the beginning of this school year, we received an email that the private schools were no longer eligible to use the ALPA. So I used ALPA last year and then I switched back to lost links this year. So I just wanted clarification, because if we can use the ALPA, that would be so much easier for us.
Yeah, and it would be aligned. John, do you have any updates on that? Because the last email I received was in November of this year, stating that that they can use ALPA.
Okay, we did not know this.
Yeah. All right, I can find out and get back to you unless you know, John.
I don't know for sure because it's, Sandra, like you said, it's changed so much. You had to use it, you couldn't use it, you had to use it,
Right.
You could use what you want. So it's just evolving interpretations from the US Department of Education. So Toshiko,
Okay.
can you
I'll
check
find
on
out.
that? And
And I'll let you guys know. Yeah.
Okay,
Great,
so
thanks.
then would, I mean, for this year, it doesn't matter, but for next school year, if we could find out and just get, so we could do our, the new kids that come in,
Yeah.
okay?
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Toshiko. I'll send you an email.
Okay. I'm checking in with ODE now, so thank you.
All right, I get to talk about the fun part of title is spending your money. Next slide. So we will be using the Google form, which probably most of you are already familiar with. We'll be using that again next year. The new form for 23-24 will be available July 1st. So in the meantime, if you have purchases, continue using the one that you already have access to. When you're filling out the form, as much detail as possible is very helpful. Links to the product or links to the PD is great. And always feel free to call me or email me and go over the details. Particularly if there's airline tickets involved, I really like to work closely with you on that to make sure we get it right. One Google form per purchase, and I'll just be in contact with you the whole time when it's been approved and when to expect the product. If you order books, they are delivered here to the BSD office and you will come and pick them up. And I label them with the title that you purchased it from. If you have extended pay, say for Title 1A, you'll be working with Jessica Steele on that. You can contact her and she'll get an HR casual labor packet out to you and the timesheet form. And then you fill out the timesheets and submit them to Jessica for processing. Another note, you'll also be working with Jessica in July for any purchases you make for Title II and IVs. You'll receive your final allocations in the summer, the notification. Plans for the 23-24 year are due no later than September 18th. You can't receive any services or make any purchases without us receiving a plan and having it approved. Carryover requests for this year are due September 18th, only for extenuating circumstances. Any purchase for 22-23 year has to be received at BSD by September 30th. So if it's looking like it's not going to make it, then we would likely cancel the order or see if you want to use 23-24 funds for that order. Evaluation of 22-23 services are due for Title I, June 12th, and 2 and 4, September 18th. And you'll receive that form for 2 and 4 in the links that I email you. Carryover, John went over this quite a bit. So just a reminder that it's extenuating circumstances only. If there are no extenuating circumstances in Title I-A, funds are redistributed to participating private schools. And if there's no participating private schools, funds may be used by BSD. For 2, 3, and 4, funds are redistributed to public and private schools using the per pupil allocation. This is just a link of resources that might come in handy to you. You're welcome to look through it and contact us with any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Erin, very much. We are 3 minutes over. Phew, that was pretty good. I'd just like to thank you for collaborating with us and serving students in our community, coming alongside us and serving students in our community and their families. And I will express my appreciation and open it up for any questions or discussion right now. If you need to go, thanks so much, and we'll look forward to seeing your intent to participate before the middle of June, and then your plan. Any questions? All right, I will leave it open in case anyone's shy, but have a very nice evening and enjoy this rapid transition from what seems like winter to summer that's coming on Friday. It's supposed to be 80 degrees. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Erin, you need to unmute.
Yep.
Thanks. Or you don't have to, but on that last slide, could you, before we send the slides out, could you add the link to the private school handbook somewhere? I think that would be helpful. Maybe instead of that last link, look at that last link to the Office of Non-Public Education, maybe replace that with the private school handbook, or maybe the ODE private school webpage now that those resources are available. I think that'd be more enlightening or more helpful than some of the other things on that list. I didn't think about updating that. Thanks.
Yep.
Oh, and you could stop recording.